Hello and welcome back to Plague Year Recaps, Episode 3. Today we're talking about the Bad King. I think there's a lot happening around him that means we need to spend a little extra time. And so that's what we're going to do today. Obviously, the Bad King, Tyrannosaurus Rex. We don't hear him called that in the show very often, which I think is a missed opportunity. In so many ways, it captures so much about him. Certainly the fact that he's named after a dinosaur, so not the man of his time, not the person to lead us in these days in the story. We have an absolutely absurdly satisfying bad guy, right? He's just all extremes. He's all drama, right? There's no substance to him. And he's completely caught up in a theater inside his own head. He reminds me a lot of the Billy Zane character in Titanic. If you remember, he was supposed to marry Rose, but then Rose falls in love with Jack, and then and Billy Zane can't let it go. So the entire ship, the Titanic, is going down, quite literally. And the Billy Zane character is obsessed with getting Jack. And there's probably a homoerotic story in there, but let's not go there. So, the same thing with our king. We have the plague. The world is falling apart, literally. It's not just his kingdom. But somehow he's just so obsessed with what he looks like on TV that he can't even process what's happening, much less lead in these times. So first he downplays the plague, then when of course it can't be ignored because a virus will not stop just because it's being ignored by somebody, even if that somebody is a king. He eventually has to lie and pretend that he knew it was going to be a pandemic, even though he didn't do anything. He's kind of like so caught up in his need to look like the hero that he doesn't actually even see the opportunity when it presents itself. Remember, he was a marginal character for a really long time, right? America season 1980, 1990, he was somewhere between a bully and a buffoon. He would get in the news for bad deals and overextending himself and doing silly programs. But I think it's really important not to forget during that time, in addition to kind of growing his serial harem and trying to get on TV, he also had developed this this dangerous streak, right? I mean, during the time of unrest in New York City, he called for the execution of the Central Park Five. This was before he was king, right? So, these were innocent boys, and at the same time, it was an opportunity for the writers to kind of expose his racism. And, so now you have a bully and a buffoon, but also this kind of absolutely depraved human instincts added to the mix. And all of these things were cultivated over time until, of course, in America season 2015, 2016, he becomes really important. And now, of course, the plague year. He's very central. But because there's also this kind of buffoon side, you have kind of this complex, I don't want to say rich, but certainly complex character. You're kind of exposing tensions that on the one hand allow you to go anywhere with the character, and as we've seen, the creators have absolutely gone everywhere and anywhere with this character. But it also limits him, right? Because on the one hand, you can look at him as the Fool King, and you think, Fool King, you think King Lear. And of course, they're drawing a lot of parallels with King Lear. Just like King Lear, who, just as a reminder, has 3 daughters. He wants to retire, become a gentleman farmer or something, so he wants to divide his land among his daughters. And he's like the daughter who praises me the best, who says how much she loves me the best, will get most of the land. So his 2 elder daughters play the game. Of course, this is like our bad king who requires the governors to say wonderful things before he sends them ventilators. And the youngest daughter, Cordelia, the one he loves the most, just won't play the game, right? She's like, well, you're my dad, and I love you and honor you the way a daughter should. I got nothing more to say. And of course the king is outraged, oh my, nothing can come from nothing. Speak again. Like he really wants her to approve of him. And she's like, that's all I got. So then of course he disowns her, and then he gives everything to his elder daughters. He then loses, they rob him of the rest of everything. And then eventually, of course, he discovers that Cordelia, his youngest daughter, was the one who cared the most about him and about his kingdom. And so he lives long enough to be redeemed, to see her hanged, to go mad, and then to die. So potentially, we have that to look forward to in the show. I don't think where this show's going, right? Because we know our king is incapable of redemption, right? He's been given opportunity after opportunity to grow as a character, and he steadfastly refuses to do so. So he becomes king. Perhaps he will rise to the moment. But no, the first thing he does is complain about the fact that the coronation crowds were too small. So okay, well, this is the beginning. Maybe over time he learns how to lead better. So you give him a good situation, he makes it worse, and then you give him a bad situation, and it doesn't get much worse than the plague, and he makes that worse too, right? He's not going to meet the moment, to use the words of Gavin Newsom, America's Governor West, right? We've seen that. And so I don't think that he's going to have a shot at redemption in the same way that Lear does. I think what's happening is we're beginning to see the emphasis shift in terms of the big bad being the plague to the the plague just being the backdrop, and the big bad being the king, right? There's nothing that he can't make worse. Because the plague is a challenge. Plagues are desperately dangerous, right? Look at medieval England. It wiped out 25% of the population. So it's not a threat to be sneezed at, if you will. Rather, it's that it is a solvable problem, right? The people have stepped up, the governors have stepped up, the scientists have stepped up, and they're figuring out how to vanquish the foe that is the plague. No, the problem is that the king can't be brought to lead, and therefore the king is the big bad. I mean, you have the cry from the heart from Cuomo, right? We don't have a king.
Just absurd. It's not the law, it's not the Constitution. We don't have a king.
We don't have a king, right? Because having a bad king is as bad as having no king. If there is no king, there is no kingdom, right? So the king is the existential threat to the kingdom. The plague, we've discovered, is a challenge, but the king is a threat to the country. So of course, this is a setting for season 2, right? Because if we know that we're going to vanquish the plague, then we must tackle this existential threat. It cannot stand. But who's going to take him on? And this is where the creators have really kept their plans close to their vest, right? There's very little telltale. In a normal narrative, you'd expect the governors to step in, right? They've established themselves in time of crisis. That's what a hero does. And then they take on the bad king and they take over the throne. But of course, this is set in this kind of mythical, obscure rules kind of kingdom with all its rites and rituals, and the governors haven't been put through the rigors of the primary challenges, and therefore they're not eligible for kingship. So now you have the heroes can't take on the king. So how does the king get vanquished, right? That's another layer of trying to figure it out. We have an elder statesman. We have two elder statesmen who have historically been at odds, but they're coming together and they're saying the king is an existential threat. But they haven't been part of the plague challenge, and the plague is going to have changed everything, right? Otherwise, it would still be called America Season 2020. It's called Plague Season, the Plague Year Season 1, right? Because the culture is transformed by it. And I don't know that you can take on the king without a solid challenger from the plague year. And what's super exciting for me right now is I don't think it's going to be America's Governor East or America's Governor West. I think it's going to be the governor of Michigan. And why do I think that? Well, the king's not only a racist, he's also horribly misogynistic. He hates women. So he has made her challenge during the plague year so much more difficult than it needed to have been. Just like he expected from Newsom and Cuomo, he expected tribute from her. But he wasn't going to give it without also drawing attention to her sex and how that makes her unfit. And I think that somewhere between his absence during the plague year, or his presence on TV, but his absence of leadership, the elder statesman is going to have to bring in this character who exposes two ills, right? The two ills of the king, which are his fundamental cravenness, racism, sexism, etc. And two, you see, one bell for one and one bell for two. So the first bell was for his sexism and his racism and his fundamental badness. And number two is, of course, his absence, his inefficiency, his ineffectiveness, his failure with regard to the plague. And she brings both, and I think she also brings youthful strength to the elder statesman. And she might be Éowyn from Lord of the Rings. She may slay the Nazgul that is our bad king. Who knows? So thanks so much for watching our update. And please, if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe. There's a little red button right there. And if you subscribe, you'll get a ding, just like we heard earlier, a ding that whenever there's a new video. Like, comment. If you have a question, if you'd like me to cover something that I haven't covered before, put it in the comments. And I'll see you soon.